RPI Consultants. I've been around the law firm world for many, many years and happy to be here talking with you today. I'm especially pleased to be presenting here today with Sara Scheu, who is the Vice President of Shared Services from Marshfield Clinic Health System. I'll let Sara introduce herself.
Hey, Brian and everybody. So I am Sara Scheu, as Brian mentioned, from the Marshfield Clinic Health System, and I do work in our IS team as our Vice President of Shared Service Solutions. And I think we'll have a little bit of time to talk a little bit more about our organizations and ourselves as we move through today. I'm glad to be with you.
Just a little bit about RPI. We're 25 plus years in the industry. We've been doing this for a long, long time now. It was born of RPI consultants who formed, the RPI consulting group. Been around it again a long time. Our consultants are we have technical experts and functional experts in the industry, and are dedicated to Infor implementations. Couple of our notes, if you will, of highlights of things we're doing. And I won't read off the entire list, but we're involved in all the pieces of an Infor implementation, including Cloud Suite, Burst, WFM, the whole gamut of products offered by Infor. And a couple of differentiators for us here: senior level resources. We've been able to succeed where others have failed. Our groups are thought leaders in the industry. We're constantly putting content out there for the community, and we have a really, really good track record with Infor in the marketplace.
Very good. And obviously, as a Marshfield Clinic Health System, we've been happy to be partnered with you and work together, and grateful for the chance to connect today on this particular topic. A little intro into Marshfield Clinic Health System and into myself. I like to have this picture of the state of Wisconsin and Upper Peninsula of Michigan here, even as I'm talking about myself and my role here. I will introduce Marshfield Clinic as well, but I have been with the Marshfield Clinic Health System for about 20 years now, and I've had roles ranging from in our training area to our sales team within the IS area to our IT business management work, and then also our shared service solutions. So I've been able to take different seats and different lens over time, which has kind of led to, as Brian and I chatted about this topic recently, and as we got the ideas, I've been able to sit in a few different seats throughout my time here, enabling me to have conversation and work together with people like Brian, but also others who are interested in this journey. As we think about the role I play now, I do have, across Marshfield Clinic Health System, we have a portfolio of over 1,800 applications. So as I'm talking about this topic today, I am not simply focused in and talking about experiences with one particular vendor. It's really a collective experience that has led to kind of the view and the lens I have. And I know I'm not alone in that. I've seen that as we've talked about this topic elsewhere. So just to kind of put that in perspective, of those applications, some are coming, some are going at all times. So in April, we decommissioned 180 applications, and we brought, I think, just 1 or 6 new ones on. I just checked, and in the last month, we brought in 6 new ones again, and we decommed 1. So I think there's always something going on within that application set, and so that's a lot of opportunity for us to be participating in conversations all the time about what does a good partnership look like as we're bringing things on, as we're in the middle of a cycle of using a product, and sometimes as we're decommissioning or bringing things off. I do want to call out for us, particularly Marshfield Clinic Health System. If you look at that map of Wisconsin, some of you watching this and taking this in maybe have never heard of any of the cities sitting up on that screen. These are rural healthcare delivery throughout the state of Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And it's something that sometimes is a little different from other industries. It's something that in many cases, we are healthcare, right? We are the only option for somebody in Ladysmith or somebody in Park Falls. And so when their loved ones are not feeling well, when they need to be healthier than they are currently, we are part of that network that allows them to have health and allows them to be part of their community. So I really feel strongly about the work that Marshfield Clinic does, and I'm excited to be part of that. Even IT has a space in that. Even the solutions have a space in that. So just a little bit more, and then Brian and I will continue moving forward. But Marshfield Clinic Health System is a company who's been around for quite a long time, starting in 1916 when 6 doctors got together and said, rather than practicing all by ourselves, what if we practice together as a group? And that was considered fairly innovative at the time, because that was a period of time where people practiced independently. Over the years, those physicians grew and gathered additional parties and additional groups. And really, at this point, we've grown to 65 clinical locations in 45 communities across those 2 states. What also is unique about Marshfield Clinic Health System is we do have 11 hospitals at this point, but we didn't start with any. So we were actually a number of physicians together to care for our communities, who then moved into the hospital space. A lot of health systems start the reverse. They're hospitals, and they work to acquire or bring in those physician practices. So we have some uniqueness, and we're excited to embrace what that means as we deliver care. We do also have a health plan. So we're able to deliver that service out to the members within our organization. We have a children's hospital as well as a research institute. So a lot of different opportunities that we bring to the area, and you can see some of the other pieces on this infogram that help you just learn a little bit more about us and what we deliver to our communities. So we are going to talk about this topic, right, Brian? Fostering a balanced relationship for optimized success. Kind of sounds fancy. We're not, neither you or I are very fancy, but we thought this is a useful topic. So what we're going to go through today is what's the reality, as according to Brian and Sara. We do talk to other people, so it's not just our reality, probably. Who are the players that we're talking about today? As you think of a balanced relationship for success, there's a lot of people we could be talking about. We're narrowing it a little bit so that we don't keep you here all day. And then what's that impact through the journey? And what are some takeaways so that people can kind of move along and take something away from this work today? All right, Brian, I know this is one of your favorite slides because of these humans, these people look pretty realistic. But as Brian and I chatted, this topic really almost had its genesis in a number of these phrases that I've heard over time. This will give you huge savings. You don't need IT staff for this. Hey, we do all the implementation for you. You don't even need a team. You don't need IT for this. You see this a few times. This is a hands-off approach for the business. You don't even need any of your business stakeholders to worry. We'll just do it for you. Hey, we use a playbook and we do all the work, so don't worry. Or this isn't a heavy IT lift. So I guess the genesis for why do we need to talk and have good relationships kind of came from sitting in and either being on the receiving end of some of this or hearing this in conversation. I guess, Brian, as you think of these, have you gotten to see or hear some of these in your career as well?
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes even be on the services side, clients will come in as we get started and repeat some of these. And we have to kind of diffuse those right out of the gate and really come in with reality and transparency as we move forward through a project.
Yeah. And the way I kind of start with this is the thought of, if these are the things coming out of any of our mouths on any of the parties, what do we think that does for the relationship? And if it's starting the relationship on some uneven ground, or it's starting in a spot where it's kind of putting an us, them, or a we, they, no matter what you're trying to be successful at, that's a really hard spot to start. So that's kind of the beginning of where we're going to kind of talk through today. And as we think of who are the players, who are we going to be talking about, we could make this very simple. It's a vendor and a customer, right? Vendor and a customer. Let's talk about that relationship. Super straightforward. But as you think about it, it doesn't usually end there. There's actually an end user. Maybe not, the customer is made up of end users. We got the security team in there, and they're vying for attention, and they're vying for some workflows to come through. There is straight up just the vendor, right? There are sponsors, so not just end users. There's the sales team, right? So that's inside the vendor. We've got legal on all sides, kind of in the mix, and we've got to fund it. So there's a finance team, or there's a funding process. So there's all these. The reality is there's all sorts of players at the table when you're trying to have success. It never seems to get to be just as simple as that vendor and that customer. So part of what we're going to talk about today, as you think of that, we're going to peel back some of the layers and really focus it in to say, well, what you'll hear us talk about are kind of 3 perspectives. What does the vendor bring to the table? What does the customer bring to the table? You'll see I have business partner / customer, and that's partly because where I sit in this is in information services in IS, and we don't call the finance, CFO or the CEO, we don't call them the customer, we call them our business partner. So it's really that same party, right? There's a party who a vendor might try to talk to and sell to. There's a party that information services at any given organization or outsource is working to support and help. And these are those three parties that, you're going to hear Brian and I talk about. What are the realities and what are some ways to just really focus in on, be aware, and improve that relationship for greater success. Brian, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about, I mentioned I'm going to talk mostly from that information services lens. As you're talking today, what views are you representing?
And actually, this is an interesting slide for RPI because we could fall in either of the three columns. As a vendor, we're providing services to you in a vendor role, but we also look at as ourselves as being a business partner with you, collaborating with you, being your advocate on projects, and being part of that team. On the information services side, with our offerings and managed services, we are part of your team. We're your backstop, or even your first phone call. So we can play a role in each of these. Each of them has different responsibilities, and each can greatly impact the success of a project.
Yeah, and I think we tapped you in all three of these. We kind of talk about you as a vendor, right? You're a service provider for us, but we use you for an extension of our team, our analyst team, not you directly, but you as RPI. And so, right, your work is part of the information services work as well. And I do know during implementation, we tapped you on that customer business partner side to say, what are you seeing, right? How are other business, how are those folks typically doing workflows, et cetera? So I agree. I have found that you likely are going to be able to represent and talk through all three of these parties that we're talking about today. All right. So we're going to start. We committed or talked about in the agenda that we're going to talk about how does this relationship matter and what are success points you can have kind of throughout the journey. And the journey we aligned to is kind of just that whole sales cycle, right? From the point in time you might get a chance to meet with each other till you're in a stable relationship side. So at the point of the pitch or the point of the sale, I bet everyone wishes it looked this simple, right? Somebody has some shiny object inside that bag that's going to make some technology product that's going to make life better for a customer. The customer extends out some payment, and then the anticipation is the payment goes to the vendor, the brown bag goes to the customer, off we go, all is good, right? A perfect world. Brian, I don't know, you've probably done a lot of different intersections. Do you often see it that simple? Is that what happens in reality?
Almost never.
Agree. So as Brian and I were thinking about that, that reality, you think that perfect or the easy back and forth, that might be like that smooth image at the top if you're trying to get across some water on a calm day with no moving water and stones are set up directly nicely for you, and you move right from the sale through contracting and legal, and it gets funded all nice, and you get to the other side. It feels like more often than not we end up in like the bottom image where you might feel like you get tossed around a little bit as you're moving down the river. And I can say I've watched vendors probably feel like that through processes with us. I've watched us feel like that as IS or as the business or as the customer. So again, I think on all sides we're probably striving for that top image, and often we're sitting more in that bottom. But I know, Brian, you wanted a different image on this slide. I don't know if you want to talk about the other way you see this.
Yeah, the one that was coming to mind was Frogger, the old video game. You're trying to get across the road or across the river without getting squished or washed away.
Yeah, I don't know if we just didn't have rights to that or I just vetoed you, but we went with these pretty calming pictures of water. But regardless, that same piece. So if you think about the journey, right, that journey from somebody needs something to it's in place, it's being used successfully. If we think about scenario 1 versus scenario 2. So scenario 1 might be, hey, Houston, we have a problem. So something's going on, right? Somebody in the business has a problem. They want to solve it. They think they can solve it with technology. So, hey, let's fix it. I met someone at a conference. I'll bring them in. Let's talk to them. Let's buy what they showed me at that conference. Down the road, shoot, we don't have the funding. Yikes, we didn't even get this approved through governance. Now we're sitting 3 months, 6 months, 8 months later. We still really need to solve this problem, right? So a lot of work happened, still sitting with nothing. Scenario 2, another opportunity. We've worked together and we jointly understand our top issues. So let's together figure out, is this a priority to fix right now? Maybe we already have something in-house that we could use, that already has the functionality, we just don't have it turned on. Or do we have a vendor that already provides this and we can just extend that vendor footprint? Or do we need something all the way new? Well, and because the parties have been working together, we know the funding timing, we know the availability of funding, so we're not doing unnecessary work at a time in the cycle where it's shut down and there's nothing to spend. Because we've been working together, we know what governance is needed, either AI governance, security governance, other type of resource governance. At that point, because of all the collaboration, there's a timeline, there's resources, there's funding, everything's lined up, and you're going to get to go, right? You're going to move forward. So it's kind of a no-brainer, right? This is a rhetorical slide, but Brian, as you maybe think about two things, how often do you feel like, I mean, percentage-wise, how often do you think we're probably in scenario 1 versus 2, and which side do people want to be in?
Well, clearly you want to be on the second side, and good communication back and forth and partnership, you can land there. A lot of times we do see ourselves in some situation of scenario 1, where people either don't understand what's already in house. For instance, that's a real common one. I mean, I'll refer to ERP, but a lot of people don't understand that functionality is already built into that package. We just maybe haven't implemented it yet, or they haven't implemented it in their area yet, and they want to go put something new in and break that mold, break that model. So we see that a lot, and then we have to address it as a team and bring it back in scope.
Yeah, it seems like a common story. I know, and I know that we get to see often. So as Brian and I got to collaborate and think about if this is reality, right? Those are the players, that's the reality. We're sitting in that sales cycle, that trying to make a deal area. What are the different rocks that are out there? And so we kind of position these as rocks, and we came up with 8 of these. There's probably more, but as we think about paying attention and having awareness to even just this set of things will certainly have you on the road to more success. So we'll just kind of talk through a few of these, not in great depth, but again, if you think about that sales cycle or that process, comes to mind. And again, we're rural not-for-profit healthcare, so what's the budget? Is there any spending available? Ends up being a top of mind. So we often run into scenarios where a doctor might be somewhere and a vendor says, "Hey doc, I could make your life a lot better. Let me sell you this." And they come back and they're really excited, right? But that doctor's job in our health system is to see patients and make them well, keep them healthy. It's not to understand all the intricacies of how does funding work and what can you buy when and what hoops do you jump through to make sure we're keeping the health system safe. So what happens in those scenarios, if a vendor kind of comes in and really kind of, you want to plant the seed in front of the people who need it, but a great question to that doctor might be, hey, when you get back into the office, if you get this into the hands of the people who understand your funding cycle and what's available, that would be a great next step, right? Just that bit of conversation can turn that rock from bumpy to smooth, and go a long way in making things happen. Same with the AI review approval, security, cyber approval, legal review and approval. All those things are things that when a vendor is making that sale into the audience who needs to solve the problem, keeping in mind that audience may not be the person plugged into these spaces. And it doesn't mean it's always IS is plugged in, but asking that question and making sure to have that conversation. On the flip side, if you are, you're the customer and you're at the conference and you're learning, and you're excited about something to come back, remembering to come back and say, I know I love this. I better go find out at my organization, what are the documented steps, because I don't know them, of how do I get the right approvals. And so, budget, AI, security review, legal, and resources. Again, if something, we just are having a conversation right now with a vendor, we want to fix something. There's something not working quite right within a product we already have. We need to fix it. Right now, there's some bigger priority work happening ahead of it that we have to fix first. And so plugging into the place that understands when our resources available, both the business, the vendor, and on the IS side, really goes a long way in making sure that it's smooth. So I think of those 5, it's not as if a vendor might say, well, it's not my job to understand the funding cycle. It's not my job to get your legal approved. Absolutely right. What it is, I would say everyone's collective job is to remember all those things are going to happen, whether you try to skip them or you try to say, let's fast pass this right to the person who knows they need it. Bringing those things up to whatever parties are working together really helps, because I don't know too many companies who don't have some version of all those things that need to happen before you can buy something, at least of any material amount. So making sure and kind of having that in the docket. Again, so depending on who you are digesting this, if you're the customer, reflecting, do my people who are out and about who want to buy things understand about us? If yes, if no, how do I make that happen? So, just some nuggets. If you're the vendor and you thought, I've never planned to talk to anyone about this, I just figure that's on them and they'll get it sorted out. What could, reflect on some of those maybe bumpier experiences, and maybe if some of these things have been at the forefront, would that go a little bit better? So I left 3 on the table, that ones that have more words to them. Brian, I don't know if you want to kind of talk through some of those rocks as well with our group.
In looking at these, I think one of the big ones is what's being sold doesn't really match what the company can deliver, especially in the services and implementation side. Been with other organizations where after the sale's done, we get handed a service contract that we can't execute. The expectations are wrong, and we're out of the gate sideways to begin with. So it's a huge thing to make sure that you have all the right people at the table as you're going through that negotiation, and making sure that everybody involved, including the services side, is at the table, so that clarity occurs before you ever sign a contract and everybody knows what they're getting into. Having IT involved at the get is super important, in my opinion, because they're going to end up supporting it on these technology implementations, and being surprised by getting a phone call from some department saying, "Hey, my software doesn't work," and it's like, "What software?" You don't want to be surprised that way either. I've seen that happen a bunch of times also, and all of a sudden you're supporting a product you had absolutely nothing to do with as it came through the door. But I do think also that it isn't incumbent upon the client to have a good intake process and have the discipline to stick with that process. No end runs, and make sure that that's well communicated throughout the organization. And not allow it's a VP's favorite thing or whatever. Hey, we got to stick with the process or it wrecks everything. So I think those are excellent points. And I think everybody listening today has witnessed some of this occur in their organizations at some point.
Yeah, agree. Those are helpful insights. And I would just encourage people to, use this as a catalyst as well, to think back through some of your best and worst, sales experiences, of how those have gone. And if there's any others to add to the list, to say, oh yeah, that's another reason why. Again, this may not be exhaustive. It's kind of that level of look that Brian and I were able to come up with. But I encourage you, as you're kind of using this as a spot of growth, there's others, and go ahead and get those documented and keep them in the forefront. So as we move out of the sales side, so we got through that. Sometimes you feel like the end of the waterfall, and and then you think, oh, and now we get to implement. Sometimes you come through that and you're just super excited, right? You're very excited. You've been waiting for this, and now you implement. Regardless, what are some ways in which, again, those 3 parties, our vendor, our customer or business partner, NIS, how can we best be working together in the implementation side? And here again, you can kind of see six different boxes. And as we think about these, I have some thoughts definitely on some of these. But Brian, do you want to take a turn to go first this time, since I took the rocks first? You get to take first dibs at this.
I'll take a couple, sure. One of them is vendors as SME vendors. I think one of the things that you have to request from your vendor is don't come with your previous knowledge to the table and give us those upsides and downsides. Help us avoid those potholes. We don't want to do that. It's not like, well, whatever you want is not, in our opinion, being a good vendor. Coming and saying, I'll give you a couple options, I'll give you the upsides and downsides, and why I think maybe you should go this direction over that. But come to the table with conclusions and help, and not just whatever you'd like to do. Because we have done this before. That's why you hired that vendor, and you should get all of that out of them that you can. The other part, and I've seen this cause issues with implementations as well, is the communications internally. Is everybody involved that needs to be involved? How do you do the change management part so nobody gets caught by surprise? How do you get the training done so people are capable to perform their duties on the new system, and you're not ignoring that or discounting that? I think that's a very strong one as well. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I think those are good. You kind of even talked about, well, you talked a little bit about no surprises. If I go to the end there, that no surprises, by doing some of that, I think, again, this is with a lot of different, we have 1,800 solutions on our rolls, so we've done this a lot, but I do think there are times where it feels like you don't want to be the bearer of the bad news, and this could be on either side, right? Having to tell the vendor that we're going to be on month end close for these next 10 days, and I know that's what you have in the project plan, is for us to be working on that, but we don't have anybody. Like, we don't have anybody, because, and not waiting till it's month end close, right? But looking ahead to talk about that. On the other side, if an implementation is going to take 18 months and the customer is very excited for it to be 14 months, let's not let us get all the way through to the 15th month to realize, whoa, we didn't hit 14, right? I think that no surprises is a big deal, depending on the size of the organization. For example, in ours, when we had a shift in an implementation timeline in the last couple of years, and it had to go all the way back to the board of directors.
Right.
It's not exciting for a senior level executive. It's not exciting for anyone to have to take that up the chain, but for anybody to then call or ask for an agenda spot on that board of directors meeting to talk about a delay or a move. So the earlier and the more communicative that can be. Other couple that are up here, just to briefly mention, that decision making along the way. This, I often feel like, is like the ask mom versus ask dad approach, and it often happens. I see it all the time in implementations, and all sides do it, right? The IT person might go ask their favorite person in the business because they know the answer they're going to get, versus asking another person who holds the line a little bit more or keeps us to standards. A vendor could ask, again, if a vendor asks, well, how much data do you need stored, right? If they ask that to the business, they're going to say all of it. I need all of it, all the data forever. And if you ask the IT folks, who maybe are the ones storing it or finding the storage solution, they might say as little as needed to just absolutely get the work done, right? So you have two different pictures. And I know, Brian, I think there's another RPI webinar out there that actually talks about this as relation to, how much data is needed. And I'm assuming this is part of that equation, right? Ask the right people, ask all the people. Now, you don't need to go around and for every little decision, ask 200 people a question. But as those three main parties in this work, you know who the key stakeholders are, and making sure that the decision making is flowing through the right places, and having that set up. It's night and day different when you know who those stakeholder decision makers are, and it's identified, and you have comfort and trust. You're going to definitely have much more success. I think those at the bottom too, we didn't talk about those yet, but the customer understanding what vendors or third parties bring to the table. This has been really important to us. And this is a two-way street as well. A customer doesn't just automatically know, oh, we could also be using, that vendor for this work, or I could also be using, RPI to do this service. It's very important, and it's finding the right timing. And if by building the relationship, it doesn't feel like, oh, hey, we can sell you some more stuff, right? That's not really what this is about. It's really that concept of, here's the additional value. You already have a connection. So here's the additional value you can have. Here's how that would work. So I think that's a really important one all throughout implementation. And we have taken advantage of that, definitely. Insert into sales cycle, like if you've already gotten into implementation, it's kind of too late to go back in time. But this is something I push. I push customers to do this as much as vendors. So if you are in a sales cycle, asking about where's the implementation team in this conversation. And again, Brian kind of talked about that as a rock on the last one. It's important enough to talk about again, because unfortunately, if you're in implementation and what's been sold doesn't match what can be done, it's going to be very hard to come to resolution on that. The resolution is somebody ends up dissatisfied. That's probably the only resolution, because it's very hard to go back in time and change what was said or change what's understood. So I continue to recommend to my colleagues, my network, when you're in those big processes of acquiring new solutions, new product, you need to ask about that implementation party and have them with you in the conversation before the sale even is final. Because by the time it gets this far, all you can do then is learn from it. And so I think that's something we can all commit to doing. Anything else on this side, Brian, that comes to your mind?
Yeah, just one more thing on the no surprises. I've seen products that in ERP, it's very common. ERP plugs into a lot of other stuff, right? And a lot of stuff plugs into it. Same thing on a clinical package like an Epic or a Cerner, and across the board in public sector, the same thing occurs. When you're implementing a new product, you also have to take into account, or ask your vendor, they should know, hey, by the way, you're going to require that this product be at this level so it plugs into our product. So you don't get surprised by that and get extra upgrades along the way that you never anticipated, and then have to go budget for and plan for. So I think it's important to get the whole picture as you move into the thing, including the third-party pieces or the external pieces of plug in or get talked to as you go forward with products like this.
Absolutely. And again, I think this is a point as you're digesting this and taking this in. If you think about your best and your rockiest implementations, are there other things that fall outside these 6 key areas or boxes? And what are those? What matters to you? Depending on your line of business or the type of implementation, I just consider like kind of name it and then own it, right? So that you can say that did not go well, and I know this could be better. So there's definitely opportunity beyond these, and just that opportunity to take the pause and use this as that growth chance for yourselves. So then we get to where we kind of all want to be. I mean, to be honest, I don't like turning off and turning on new platforms all the time. I think once you can get into a spot where you have great relationships, great functionality coming at you, and then you're just optimizing, I think that's a really sweet spot to be in. I don't know that I feel like we've had a lot of changeover in our platform sets in the last 5 years. So I feel like we haven't been in that spot for very long, but I think it's an exciting spot for those relationships where we are. So as we think about the ongoing relationship, I think again, the ongoing relationship has tons of opportunity to make sure you're foundationally working together. Everything from when new features come out to optimization, you're expanding, so you're growing and you need more. At every renewal cycle, there's that time. There's the SOS, something is not going right, and I need to call out to somebody, and who are you going to call to? A couple other pieces that are just involved in that relationship. How can you add value through really concrete communication? For example, statements of work, so not keeping it nebulous or keeping people guessing. And then that kind of tying back to that internal policy again. So what are those policies inside the organization on either side really driving and allowing to support a really strong relationship? So again, I'll look to you, Brian, if there's 1 or 2 of those that are your favorites that you want to call out or talk about as a start.
Sure. I think any software service provider, I think that the best spot you can hope for, want to be in, and strive to, is to be that trusted advisor status with your client. And in order to do that, you do the things that you've listed here. I mean, there's times where new features are coming out, and you go, hey, I think Marshfield could use that. I'm going to give them a shout and talk to them about it, that new features part. Or there's also the times where you could become the trusted advisor by saying, don't do this. We've seen this is not a good move. Let's let that mature a bit before you take it on yourselves. And there's ways to do that. And again, understanding the internal workings of an organization and coloring between the lines and staying there, so you're not a problem for your client as well, I think makes a huge difference. So a lot of these things resonate with me, and I think resonate with all service providers.
Yeah, I would agree. I kind of think about this one. There's a meme that talks about what your company culture is by how your stomach feels on a Sunday night, like how you feel going back to work the next day. That's how you feel about your own company. I would put it to this: you kind of know how you feel about a vendor or how strong that relationship is by when you see a meeting with that vendor in your calendar for tomorrow. Are you excited about tomorrow and you can't wait to kind of get in and talk to that vendor, or are you thinking, I kind of wish that tomorrow I'd be sick. I prefer being sick to having to have that, so I do think where you want to be is, and I have so many of these relationships that we've built over time, and they've really come from that combination of having success in these various interaction points, right? So every interaction point that's listed here is an opportunity to grow that partnership and make it more solid and end up with more success. So again, I think from an IS lens with new features, one of the big buzzwords now is AI, right? Everybody's putting AI in everything, or they say they are, and they're calling it a good thing. You're selling into healthcare, and if you surprise me with AI, and we don't have that foundational experience, we're going to have some trouble because I have to take it through a process, right? I can't have AI especially generative AI, jumping in and learning from protected health information, right? I have a lot of guidelines and a lot of pieces that has to go through. So, that's one of those pieces where a new feature, hey, you already own it, you just turn it on, or hey, it's already on. Like those kind of surprises are things that you can, no matter how shiny and amazing the new feature is, you got to be an advocate for that customer that you work with if you're the vendor. And then as a customer, making sure, like, I don't know if my business partners quite know the same scrutiny that you have to take some of those features in. They might just be presented to say, hey, there's this new statement matching that it's AI, it's bedded in, you just got it. And now you've just made my business partner super excited to just turn it on. But guess what? We probably have, 8 weeks of review and making sure, and that's an example. It's an interesting one. AI will get more mature over time, where the AI producers will also already understand all the guidance that's coming, right? That's coming along with it. But we're all like kind of walking across that bridge as it's being built. So that's just a good example of the closer you can be together, the more success you're going to have in adding value or getting value, I guess. That optimization example, and again, Brian, I look to you and to the team you work with. This is an example where the vendor, the provider, working with us and knowing us as a customer is so important, because we know we have optimization on the table, and the timing that I get from our partners to say, now would be a good time to not pass on this, right? Or now would be, or this one, it's going to get better yet. So let's wait. That matters a lot. And it's really hard. Again, if you think about it, if we have 1,800 solutions, my team personally is responsible for maybe 600 of those. I don't have 600 analysts, right? I don't have that many people. I have maybe 12 analysts, 13 analysts that are trying to work through those. So it's really important that they have that partnership on the vendor side to make sure we're looking there. Expansions, renewals. Renewals is a really good one. One of the pieces there, and I think this is like a pretty transparent communicator. So I understand that companies stay in business by making sales and growing and getting more revenue. That's how it works, right? I do think at renewal times are really important times to be very honest about assessing what is my customer using in this renewal. We just came through a renewal that we had purchased 9 modules from a particular vendor, and 3 of them we'd never used ever. 10 years had gone by in this relationship. And this year, finally, our business partner and us, we kind of got on the same page, and we said, are we ever going to get value from this? Why don't we turn them off? I would have loved for 3 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever the last renewal was, for someone to have helped us see that, you may not be able, you're not in a spot maybe that these are going to get turned on and add value. And I'm not asking people to be mind readers. But that there's multiple parties at that conversation. And it's really important, whoever sees the problem, speak up, right? If you see the problem, speak up and work through it, because I can say that renewal actually came through in a way that it could have gone a lot of different ways. It went in a way that I'm willing to keep having conversations, right? It wasn't where they said, well, too bad, like you're going to keep paying for those things because that's what that's what you have. I think having those partnerships and having those relationships and building towards that is really, really important. The SOS, I know we've had this with RPI. We had a staff member who was a critical staff member who took another position, and looking to say, how long is it going to take us to backfill, hire, retrain, get that person up to speed? Or do we take this opportunity to identify what work is most critical off that person's plate that we can't absorb, and how do we work with a partner, and bring that resource in that way? That's one SOS. I think we had another where we had we were working through a go live of an expansion, and we needed another tenant for just a really short time, right? And we needed it from 2 different vendors. And one vendor said, you do so much business with us. Here's your tenant. You need it for 30 days. Go ahead. And the other one, we paid for, and we went through a lot of contracting and negotiation to pay for it for 30 days. And again, processes are processes, and that has to happen. But I have to say, the vendor that I'm excited if that happens again to work with is definitely one over the other, because of just that partnership and how we got to have that conversation. So, and these last couple again are just kind of tips. That internal policy continues, Brian, to be through any of these conversations. And when I say I sure wish a vendor would do X, Y, or Z, that doesn't mean I'm releasing any of IS or the customer from any responsibility. Who can buy a product, who can bring a product, who can prioritize a product, or who can do a renewal. All those things have to be really hardwired in a company that's buying things. I just really appreciate when a vendor can step in, and we have turnover in leadership, we have turnover in staff. And so if there's consistency on that vendor side to help coach and bring people along, that goes a long way in continuing to build that success. As I was chatting, Brian, any other things come to mind from your lens in terms of that ongoing relationship?
No, I think I'm good on this one. Good.
All right, so we return to the fun human blobs as we take care. So as we think about we moved through that journey, the journey across from buying something to implementing it to being an ongoing customer and partner. What if conversations went like this? So let me tell you about the cycle for approving funding at our organization, who we need to work with, who we need to pull in to be successful. If I said that as a customer, instead of being like, yeah, I think we can get that in by December, right? What if I talked about it that way? If we said, here are the IT partners that we can bring to the table. So, maybe, and if the business and the vendor are working all this time on some data discrepancies, if right away the business partner says, wait, let's bring in our data and analytics team, and they can be part of that conversation. That goes a long way. Or who can we talk to understand the services in your organization? So how do you do, change management, data support? If a vendor asks that question to the doctor would probably say, I don't know. Is that important? Right? So I think just kind of coming with those powerful questions, or, even the who verifies that this is cyber secure, that this has gone through your security check. They're either going to say, I don't know, or they're going to say, oh, I can't believe I forgot. Yes, we have to take it through there. So to me, this is where we want to get to. And by being purposeful, we can get here and have conversations that align more to this than some of those conversations we saw in our earlier graphic. So takeaways, and I think I joked when we've talked about this before, Brian, really that rocks slide, the implementation slide, the ongoing relationship slide, those all kind of built takeaways along the way. But as you and I reflected on, in the end, what matters? And, to me, that first one comes up again and again. Whether you're the vendor or the customer, if you're in the line of business, you're in the line of business. And what I mean by that is, if you're a productivity tool, that's the solutions that you sell, but you're selling to me in healthcare, you're no longer a productivity vendor, you're a healthcare vendor. And so if some change in the service you give me causes me to not be able to, for example, my patients can't log onto our portal any longer, I need you to realize that service you sold me, now that it's down, is preventing patients from getting care. You're now, again, you're a healthcare vendor, and how you respond to support, how you respond to all of the effort and the collaboration, it matters. And so that's a mindset thing. And I tell my IT people that you might be an analyst, you might be an engineer, but you're in healthcare. So like when we talk about, where do you work? If we aren't thinking of our line of business kind of first before our function, I think you end up with some risks. And so that's a takeaway that I continue to kind of talk through. So that's kind of the biggest one I like off of this slide. We'll probably end up talking about all of them, but I let Brian go next if he has a favorite of these takeaways.
I'll go with the don't shy away from the area with the most knowledge. Really, I think you have to dive in there, even on the vendor side, and make sure as a provider side coming in that you're going to the folks that really need to get spoken to or spoken with, and go deep. Don't just take one person's word for it. Make sure that you're really getting to the people who have that knowledge captured and leverage that.
Yeah, I like that one. I think about some of our business partner, our leader in our community health and wellness area. He might only have to go through a renewal for his product set once every 3 years. The people he works with on my team are going through 200 in that same time period. And so how can we make sure we're using the people who can help us get across the line the way we need to? I agree. I think those other couple out there, the impact is real. I mean, doing this, putting the time in on the relationships and doing this well, it does improve the dollars, right? It can seem like, well, if I tell them they're not using this module, I'm going to lose out on this renewal. The next time when we need something more, we're going to look to that vendor first to say, did they offer this? Because they were amazing to work with. They helped us see the things we weren't even using, so we could reallocate those dollars off and use it somewhere else, right? The success, the outcomes, having that additional business, I really feel by focusing on these relationships and making them matter, there's the impact is there. It's not even just soft impact. It's true, ROI that comes from putting this work in, which I then kind of think leads to that last one. Just the relationships matter. Build them, maintain them. Don't just. I think of Brian and I's chance meeting during a go live that turned a little bit sideways, right? It's 2 years later, 3 years later, and we continue to be able to work together. We get to jump together and present things and bring webinars and do work. So I think that's because of the relationship we built, and we decided it mattered, and we're carrying it forward. Whether there's a tangible item in front of us we have to work on right now, or we think there will be in the future, that's the reality. We want to have that bench ready on all sides so that we have that relationship. With that, Brian, I guess you want to have any other closing thoughts as we wrap up?
No, not really. I guess I just in looking at all this, I think this is all very, very good information for people to consider as they're implementing any new system in their business. And a lot of very good points made. A lot of stuff that we all see as we go through our implementations and through our careers. It's good reminders, and it's really good information to keep top of mind as you move through new ones.
That's great. And I think I'll speak for both of us, but you can find us on LinkedIn. So if there's something that we didn't address, the way that you have some additional questions or conversations, I'm always happy to grow the network that I get to work with. I know, Brian, you and I have similar approaches to that. So feel free to reach out. Happy to have other conversations and just really appreciate the time people are taking to digest this topic. And Brian, it was always good to get a chance to converse and collaborate with you to kind of put our heads together and think, what else might we know that we can share with others? And I think this is a topic that we're definitely hearing from people that they can take away and grow.
Always a pleasure working with you on these.
And you as well. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.